All right, so a warm welcome to our first Digital Saloon Talks. I'm Lily, I'm the coordinator of this networking event tonight. And while everybody else is joining, I want to make sure that you're having really a good overview about what's happening in this power hour and what to await us here. So this is really a hand-picked crowd of amazing people of the tech and innovation scene in Europe. And to give you really a good experience, you can light up the chat. So if you don't see the chat, there is a black bar below and there you can click on chat. So with the chat, you can interact with speakers and ask questions. And also many of you muted yourself. Everybody's muted to have best audio quality here. Looking good. I hope you all have a drink at your hand because it is supposed to be a networking and after work session here. Yeah, thank you again so much for being here. Just to make sure, are we still more people? One more. Cool. I think we're everybody here now. Cool. So we have two special guests today. So we have two keynotes, two networking sessions, and our host speaking as well. So our two special guests for today are Ivanka. She's professor at the ESADE Business and Law School, and she will share her insights on the current situation and explaining how to effectively innovate through crisis. Welcome, Ivanka. She will talk later.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
Hey, cool. And we also have Mayra from Google for Startups, and she will be talking about how Google Startup Program for Western Europe and how entrepreneurs can master the change and challenges that are occurring towards the COVID-19. Hello, Mayra.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Cool. So let's kick off the session and invite our two leaders of the two companies who make this beautiful evening possible on stage. Welcome, Ruben and Felix. Ruben, if you want to start.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for being here. I'm very thrilled to have with all of you today our first Digital Saloon Talks. For those of you who know this format, it's always a very intimate setting where we like to bring together friends of Cavalry Ventures. We're very lucky to have thought leaders amongst us today, and you know, a great complementary crowd. So I'm just very thrilled, yeah, to really kick things off, to see how this format resonates with everybody here, to learn from both Ivanka and Mayra, and also to engage in active networking today. On Cavalry Ventures, to those to whom I haven't spoken in the last a couple of weeks, we recently closed our second fund, went from 20 million in Fund 1 to 80 million in Fund 2. Very happy about this move. Not many funds are able to quadruple fund size. And we continue to invest in angel and seed stage software companies in Europe. If you look at Cavalry, it's always like having a big bunch of angels as investors. You know, in fact, Felix, you know, with founder of FoundersLane, you also invested, you're a dear friend. So this is one of the benefits our portfolio companies enjoy, to get access to people like Felix, to the FoundersLane network, also to speakers like Ivanka and Mayra, and many, many more. This said, I would like to hand over to you, Felix. If anybody would also like to talk about funding, very happy. We invest 250,000 euros to 1.5 million initially. Yeah, this said, here's my beer. I say Prost, yeah, and please enjoy your time.
Cool. Thank you, Ruben, and thank you for all the people who are actually here today, and for the people who organized it, coordinated everything today. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and thousand thanks to Ruben. I think you're very, very inspiring on the one hand side, and the energy you put into Cavalry Ventures and bringing up this great fund and all the great work investments you have done in the past years. It's really amazing, and also a side story for some people, maybe, or I think most of them, even the ones from FoundersLane and Fight Back here today, they don't probably know. Ruben and I actually started in the same office 4 years ago, I would say. 5 years ago, 4 years, 5 years ago.
Yeah, pretty much.
Small, very, very small office, both of us, pretty much next door. At 15 square meter, I had at least with a solo show. And nowadays, FoundersLane is in Europe, Asia, and MENA. We have more than 2,000 square meters in office, but this is not a success KPI. Just like bringing it up because I was thinking about like how it actually started and how different it is today. Yeah, great to be here. The ones who don't know FoundersLane is a corporate venture builder. So we are building new ventures, new platforms together with corporate boards, they're mostly larger than actually $1 billion. We're doing it specifically in the area of health and climate. For us, it is a new asset class. It is not about doing the next corporate innovation theater show, for doing the next proof of concept or the next customer journey, design thinking stuff. It is really setting up the new ventures that are systematic and very, very important for us as a society, because obviously the next step now is to actually innovate in an area that is very regulated, so climate and health areas. And this is what we do in the past years. Some clients or some corporates, we'd like to call them partners, or for example, Allianz or Vattenfall, to name just two of them. Yeah, I think that's probably it. If you're interested to understand or hear more about FoundersLane, on the one hand side, obviously look at our website. On the other hand side, we also have written a nice book, Fight Back, where we explain a lot about this new asset class, corporate venture building, how it works, and why it is so important for us as a society as such. Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great time.
Perfect. Thank you, Felix. Cool. So I would love to hand over to Ivanka for our first inspirational talk. Ivanka.
Thank you very much, Lily.
Very welcome.
And Felix, Ruben, thank you really for hosting me. I'm very happy to be here, and I hope everyone's doing well and in a good mood considering the circumstances. I mean, I'm going to get straight to the point. I would like to share with you about 3 main points, things that I've noticed these days, and also 3 recommendations concerning how to innovate out of the crisis. So, I mean, clearly, it needs no explanation. We're living devastating times, from healthcare outcomes to economic outcomes. And obviously, the two are very strongly related. So just today, I read an article in New Yorker that mentions that we are on the verge of a new catastrophic hunger period. So really things to ponder about and see how we can help, particularly as the innovator and entrepreneurial community. Moreover, it's likely that we are not seeing the end of this yet, and that this is just the beginning of the first phase that will probably spread out over a period of 2 years of periodic loosening and tightening of the lockdown. So this is really the bad news, but enough with the bad news. I mean, we heard a lot about that already, and I'm sure you're very aware of it. But while the net effect is indeed negative, it is unlikely that it's going to be homogeneous, and it's unlikely that the catastrophic results are inevitable. So what I want to talk about is really the differences that will emerge, and particularly the differences between winners and losers from COVID-19 crisis. And by winners, I don't mean just the short-term, e-commerce solutions that will benefit from the fact that we're all sitting at homes and ordering. I'm talking about the companies that will manage, thanks to their smart actions, to survive and even thrive on the long run. And from the loser perspective, the opposite, right? Those that will face long-term consequences because they're not able to adapt. So I did a little bit of analysis when Felix asked me to do this, and I collected some of my own experiences in executive education programs that I've been teaching lately, and also some of the research that some of my colleagues have been doing. And combining these two, I came up with the three things that I believe that will differentiate between the winners and the losers of this crisis. And first one is really obvious. It's the industry differences, right? Board of Innovation has, in the recent report, documented that certain industries like e-commerce are expecting to see increase in demand, for example, in Q2 to Q4 of 2020. And then there is a large distribution all the way to the ones that will be catastrophically impacted, like tourism and travel, where the decline of more than 50% is expected in the same period, right? And that's kind of a, a no-brainer. And certainly it's important to think about your industry when you're adapting. But that particular point doesn't really, lend itself to great conclusions and takeaways. So instead of telling you as a business school professor, it depends, I'm just going to go to the next two that I think are much more interesting because they allow us to move around it. So irrespective of what industry you're in, the second thing that we are seeing, and we have evidence from the previous crisis and recession that determines the difference between winners and losers, is of course access to funding, liquidity, and not just for the purpose of short-term survival, but also for the purpose of investment in the innovation. And this seems to be one of the most fundamental differentiators, right? The ability to invest and become better, at least to maintain, if not increase the investments in the times of crisis. So everything we mentioned so far about the projections is of course expectations, guesstimates, but here we have some more profound and solid research findings. So in 2001-2002 period, a study by Rotterdam School of Management professors shows that there were two types of companies: ones that maintained their R&D investments, and the others that started to save on their R&D investments. And the ones that maintained their R&D investments in the period of 4 years following the crisis have increased their stock price performance by 300%. Whereas those that reduced the saving and saved on the R&D actually had much worse outcomes. So I think that's really important, right? That relationship that they were able to show in 2001-2002 crisis. But here's another study in 2008 crisis done by my colleague Yanis Ioannou from London Business School. Yanis looked at how companies adapted in this crisis, and while the study from 2001-2002 shows that only 25% maintained their investments, the 2008 study shows that majority of the US companies at least were looking to maintain their investments in R&D. And that was again fundamentally linked to their ability to increase, in his case, return on assets in the following years, right? So seems that increase in the number of companies that are investing was probably from the experience from the 2001-2002 crisis. And I mean, everything is very nice illustrated in the 2009 speech by Craig Barrett, the CEO of Intel, who says, you cannot save your way out of the crisis. You can only invest your way out of the crisis. So that's why I'm really, really, thrilled to hear that you guys have managed to raise so much and are ready to invest. Okay, so that's about the investment. That's my second point: investing in innovation. The third thing that I think will determine winners from losers has to do with the ability to innovate. And here I'm more talking from the experience that I have with the companies that I'm collaborating with and their innovation arms. we're seeing two types of companies. On one side, there is a group of companies who are reactive and who are rigidly just waiting and seeing and sticking to the old plan. And this has to do either with the lack of leadership or with the rigid hierarchies that do not allow to adapt easily. On the other hand, we see also a group of progressive and proactive companies that have already built their systems for experimentation and innovation. And here are a couple that I'm working with, and I'm sure there are many more. We're just going to hear about Google in a couple of minutes. But ones that I had more experience with are NL, for example, and FC Barcelona. And these companies, even though they are, 100 years old and established, have over the years created engines of innovation communities, crowdsourcing platforms, hubs. In the case of FC Barcelona, a lab that helps them collaborate with their existing ecosystem and use their own internal organization, including the athletes and the fans and amazing brand that they have in order to come up with new radical innovations. So that's kind of the second ones. I think progressives and proactives are going to be the winners. And it matters a lot whether you had systems for innovation to start with, but also we are seeing that companies who have been perhaps dormant, but had at least a good innovation culture are able to be entrepreneurial. Here I take my own school, ESADE Business School. So we have, for example, managed to transfer, like many other schools, over 4,000 learners online in a matter of days. Were these, most amazing digital experiences in terms of learning experience? Probably not, but we are constantly improving. And I myself have created now a course that I'm quite excited about it. I believe this is an improvement and actually a bit of very interesting twist for my courses on innovation. So these are particularly good times for large companies to try out business model innovations like low-cost disruptive innovations. And the reason for that is that it is now the times when the customers are generally open even to the lower quality value propositions, something that traditionally is hard for established companies that are quality oriented to go for. And then lastly, revolutionary innovations. 2001 brought and strengthened Netflix and a number of other companies. 2008 brought unicorns from the shared economy like Airbnb or TaskRabbit. I wonder, and I guess I'm leaving this for you to think about as well, I'm sure you are on a regular basis, what will be the unicorns of 2020? I can think of a couple of areas. I'm closely looking at health tech and energy, but also increasingly in ed tech, where I'm participating as well. So that's about the main takeaways or things that I believe are going to distinguish between winners and losers: industry, investment in innovation, and ability to experiment, particularly for large companies. And maybe for the end, for the last couple of minutes, I would just like to think about, what are the three main things to take home and how to innovate out of the crisis if you're a startup or if you're looking for startups who can become revolutionary. And here again, three takeaways are: the first is the observing of the signals. What we're seeing in these times of discontinuity is very different behaviors, very different problems are surfacing that perhaps were not that evident before. Right now, there's the sheer prevalence of people who are losing their healthcare in the United States, for example, is incredible. Right? So everyone who's been fired recently is within a month of losing their health benefits. how can these people be served in a better way? What would be the new business models that enable that? And then the challenges that people experience when they are working from home, the workarounds that, you know, progressive users, early adopters are creating themselves to help themselves. These are all signals in the trends that can be followed to the next innovations that change paradigms. And myself, I'm looking at particularly the sheer number of MBAs that are losing internships this summer. And perhaps, you know, that's not as problematic as entire unemployment, but for them in their careers, this is profound. And given that I feel responsibility, in particular, considering my role as a professor, I decided that that's the one that I will focus on. So I'm sure that all of us have one or two areas where we can do more, even personally. The second thing, besides observing these signals and workarounds, is capitalizing on customer openness. And by that, I mean three things. The first, that the habits are getting disrupted, and customers are more than ever willing to experiment, to try new things, to get out of their comfort zone. There are no routines, or routines are being reshuffled. Second, expectations are low, so even early stage prototypes can fly. And finally, openness to collaborate is pretty cool. So for these students that are going to be missing out on their internships, I created, in collaboration with my best students, an experimental course on radical innovation that will be fully digital, and also based on projects where we will be trying to create new innovations from the signals that we find from COVID-19. So it's doing good by doing well logic, and it's also a very pragmatic approach, and at the same time an experiment in the EdTech innovation. And so finally, besides the customer openness, there's one more thing that we can, as innovator community, benefit from, and that is the engagement of talent and the ecosystem. So the drive has never been stronger. People are extremely happy to put in a lot of energy if they find the right cause. The survival instincts has fired up, and this is almost goes to the volunteering, figuring out how, you know, on the long run, the benefits will be shared. And there's also a good number of people who are free and who have unfortunately been either fired or do not have next steps. So capitalizing on that talent to do good and do well is something that I think we should explore. For example, for this course, I'm recruiting mentors for my MBA teams, and I have seen you know, unprecedented number of people signing up, senior folks with lots of experience willing to help. So I think that is, to finish on a positive note, I think that's, you know, we're going to see a lot of good come out of it as well in amid of this this disaster. So this is it from me. I had a 15-minute mark, so I hope I'm on time, Lily. You haven't been complaining. So thank you. Thanks for the attention. And by all means, you know, contact me, ask questions. We can talk now or later via LinkedIn. Very happy to continue.
Cool, Ivanka. Thank you so much for this insight. I have a question for you. What is one of those projects that students come up with now that you are?
So we are, at the moment, I'm literally designing the course. So they will start working on the project in the early June. And I already know that there are teams that are interested in helping with disaster relief, unemployment, and all the other challenges concerning COVID-19. I have teams interested in EdTech, and then there are many others that still haven't voiced their preferences. But I'll keep you posted. So ask me again in 3 weeks' time.
Mayra, it will be your turn to inspire us. And after that, we have another breakout session with a new set of people.
That's
Simon,
great. Thank you.
Slides, right?
Yeah, so Simon, I think, will share some slides. They're not crazy filled, so don't worry if you can't really see them. I will just talk over them. But if you can see some nice pictures and some insights on, Google for Startups and our works. So,
can you see it already?
Can you see it? Perfect. I can see them slides. So, I am Mayra. As mentioned, I lead the Google for Startups team here in Germany. We are, part of a global team with a smaller team based out of Berlin. Currently, as you can see or not, I try to pimp it a little bit, but I'm in home office in my broadcasting live from my bedroom, so very exciting. And then, first of all, thanks Cavalry and FoundersLane for the invitation to join you all today, and also, to give us, or me personally, the opportunity to introduce you a little bit to Google for Startups work and explain also how our community is responding to challenges posed by COVID-19. So there's definitely something that we also looked into. To get started, and Simon, if you go to the next slide. So for those of you who are not familiar with our team and our work, Google for Startups mission is really to level the playing field for founders and communities to succeed, to connect them with the best of Google's products, connections, and best practices. So what does that mean? We do this basically by offering connections and spaces for our community to foster exchange, collaboration. We have campus hubs and tech hubs that we partner with in different locations across the globe. We obviously have Google products, technology, and offer trainings in those areas to make sure that startups know how to best use them. And we also share best practices on our culture, our methods, and what we love to call our Google magic, that we are sharing. We're really relying on pulling resources from all areas of Google and matching them with the needs of startups. So the core of our team is really like we're acting as a platform. So we're not really on the sales side, we're not really on the marketing side. We kind of sit somewhere in between as a team that is more like enabling startups, and we are a platform. So we have like our programs and our startups that are in our portfolio on the one hand that we match with Google experts, with the right products and with the right expertise on the other side, which is basically how we operate and work. So moving maybe to the next slide. So as we all know, since the beginning of the Corona crisis, the startup ecosystem has been juggling, a massive degree of uncertainty. And reality is that many of them are really struggling right now, and they're all facing an unclear future. And as Ivanka already said, for many, the crisis will have catastrophic results, right? And clearly there will be losers and winners. However, it's not all, doom and gloom. And thankfully, in all of this, we are also seeing some positive trends and surprising success stories emerging from within our community. So when I thought about, what to, bring to this talk today, and I felt, this is the end, or almost the end, hopefully, for like a long week of another remote work, never-ending video calls or Zoom calls in this case, cooking, tidying up in my case, and for some homeschooling and excessive exercising as the one thing that we all do, hopefully. I feel like we are also in the need for some positive outlook, and I'm glad for, I'm also thankful that Ivanka already also shared kind of this positive outlook and take, coming from her perspective. So in the next few minutes, what I wanted to cover is just to give you really a glimpse into our work with and for startups by sharing 5, as I call it, maybe Corona-inspired emerging trends and observations from within our Google for Startups community. So I call them 5 positive takes on an uncertain future. There's no, it's not really complete. It's like a non-exhaustive list, but there's just like some observations that I made, that our team made, and some things that we are seeing happening within the Google for Startups ecosystem. If we go to the next slide, starting and diving right in with the first, is there is really a newly channeled power of virtual, in brackets, collaboration that is emerging, which is super inspiring to see. So from the broader kind of macro perspective, what's happening, what we are obviously observing from the Google perspective in a very positive way, is that the digital transformation is accelerating in these days, right? It's like companies are being forced, to go remote, to explore like different ways of working. And you can really see that a new work era is kind of finally starting. The cause might be kind of a struggle and a crisis, but it's really interesting to see that process happening. And what we obviously see here, what you all are aware of, is that while many larger companies are being forced to adapt structures and processes, others are much better equipped for this shift. And startups being amongst those specifically, who are actually very well like just from the way they're structured and operate, are actually very well equipped to operate and respond to this crisis, at least from like kind of a structural and standpoint and setup. And even like obviously tech companies like Google, you know, we recently shifted 100,000 plus Google employees who are all working remotely. And thankfully now we're also seeing, you know, that those structures and infrastructures that we already work with regardless, they're now really coming into play, because it's really a seamless transition for us. I mean, aside from the like kind of the personal challenges that comes with, you know, remote work and being disconnected, you know, on a day-to-day basis, like we're very well connected, you know, through all the tools and technology that we have. And an example that we see, which is interesting, because as I mentioned this, that we already have all this infrastructure and all, you know, the tools at hand, and we're already using them. And what we see now though is that, you know, we see a never seen before collaboration starting amongst our network, for example. So we have tons of partners that I already mentioned across the globe, you know, accelerators, programs, you know, other tech hubs. And what we really see in this crisis is that they're now all coming together and collaborate. So before they would maybe meet once or twice a year to just share, you know, in person actually on a high level, you know, like what are their, you know, challenges and opportunities. And now like they've established weekly check-ins, meetings, they have shared docs, they are sharing learnings, because people are all going through the same challenges, and those companies and tech hubs specifically serving startups. So it's really interesting to see like that energy and development there in what can happen if you're forced, but also what can happen if you have the tools, you know, at hand to really foster this collaboration. And one example, and Simon, if you go to the next slide, that I wanted to share is actually an example of cross-sector collaborations that are emerging, and that we are also with Google trying to be a part of. So some of you might have heard of this effort, not a small one, the V versus Virus. It started off as a hackathon with, you know, and grew quickly into the biggest hackathon in history, with over 30,000 active participants that all came together to develop ideas to fight the impact of COVID-19. Many Googlers also participated, and, you know, just proactively, but now we, you know, we started to move into the second phase of what started again as this hackathon and ideation part, that they're moving into a huge implementation program to get, you know, to ensure those the best ideas really see the light of the day. And Google came in as a corporate partner to this approach. And what's really fascinating here is that you have again 30,000 people who haven't really met before, and they're self-organizing, they're organizing in groups and using really those tools and structures to collaborate, you know, to find those solutions. And the same is also true for Google. You know, we have, you know, a whole volunteering infrastructure in place where we bring in Googlers with up to 100% of their time actually for a few weeks to support those projects. So we actually gathered more than 60 Googlers who all contribute to this effort, and there's many exciting projects. I'm sure to share that link and check them out. There's like, you know, anything from medical, you know, providing medical supplies, and to helping out people in their local neighborhoods and supporting local businesses. And, you know, many of them are actually now looking that they are on the verge of growing into actual businesses or social businesses. So we're really helping that and see that as a huge, you know, collaboration effort. As you move to the next slide, maybe number 2 as an observation is also that startups are really, I mean, some of the, you know, the true COVID-19 innovators, as to call them. Obviously, one thing that is happening that we see is that the speed and scale of research and development in response to the COVID-19 outbreak is really unprecedented in human history. And what we also see, and is very evident at the same time, is that large corporations are less capable of adapting, you know, and therefore they are actually falling behind. So we see the startups are way better positioned to change directions, move quickly in adapting their products, their services to the new reality, but also specifically with regards to scientific and in the R&D world, where we see that startups are really on the forefront. And if you move to the next slide, these are just some examples. So we have, and I will talk about it in a little bit, several programs where we support founders, you know, coming from across different industries. And what you really see here is like how they're also pivoting their business, and they're really like, you know, fostering, you know, this also as an opportunity. So maybe just to mention one, we have in our current cohort of the Female Founders Program, we have Nina Patrick, who's working on microbes. They have this amazing technology with bioink that they developed that has been used for testing contamination in the food supply chain. And they're now kind of completely pivoting it to see how can this, you know, this technology using biomarkers, you know, to identify biomarkers for COVID-19, which could be like a whole new testing kit that they're developing, which can be, you know, done in less than an hour. So she's working on that. Maybe one more founder to mention, we have Emily Jordan, is also part of our previous cohort. She's the founder of Intrepida, is an analytics and AI platform for healthcare. And she just launched Encore AI as like the first, or one of the first, COVID-19